Hey, my name is PolishLynx and welcome to another episode of Asphyxia. Let's see where the girls are going and if they actually can survive in this not really that dangerous area, right? Well, I don't think they are that far away from the group. We'll see about it, so yeah. This really does look familiar. Are you kidding me? You were working in circles or something? That was the fourth time Percy had made this observation. Samantha knew. She had been counting. Roberta ground her teeth together, pressing one hand against her temple. A vein in her forehead was throbbing. You don't have a headache, do you? What do you think? Isn't that to be expected, given the circumstances? I'm sorry. I know it was a stupid question. I was just trying to make conversation. I hope you'll forgive me, Sam, when I say I'm not in the mood for conversation right now. Yes, of course. I'll be quiet. Roberta had been trying very hard to keep her temper under control this last hour, but it had been boiling away underneath her strained expression all the same, like lava inside a volcano. Roberta hated being lost, and she hated being disoriented, and she hated being confused. These were simply not Roberta-esque states of being. Roberta was a thorough girl who annoyed? Okay. Bringing order to disorderly things, which was Samantha often pondered the main reason Roberta deemed to be her friend. I mean, I thought annoyed as in completely a bit different actually written, but I guess not. Roberta liked planning things and she liked making schedules, and above all, she liked keeping to them. This school trip, unfortunately, had been nothing short of a disaster. Everything that could have gone wrong had gone wrong, and it was driving Roberta crazy. The pressure was building. With just the slightest provocation, she was going to snap. And the poor soul who unwittingly provided that provocation was Samantha. I wish Lily was here. Samantha had not meant to say it out loud. Instead, she muttered it under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. After their numerous arguments on the subject of Miss Lillian Wordsworth, Samantha knew better than to bring her name up around Roberta, particularly when Roberta was in full mood. Samantha might have been masochist, but she wasn't stupid. Far from it, in fact. But it didn't matter what her intentions were. She had let the small prayer slip from her lips, regardless, and Roberta had heard her. Excuse me, Samantha? Samantha paused. Roberta had stopped walking. Their walking was probably pointless anyway, given they seemed to have been going around in circles, but the sudden cessation of movement, a break in the status quo, seemed to signify something. Something deeply unsettling. Samantha's heart convulsed. It was almost as though it had sensed danger, was trying to eject itself from her body, in a self-defeating manner of self-preservation. Roberta, are you alright? I believe you already asked me, Samantha, and my answer is much the same answer as it was before. I'm not alright. In fact, I'm the exact opposite of alright. I have been doing my very best to remain calm despite our adverse circumstances. Yeah, right. That is what I'm used to after all. When I'm with you, I always have to be the mature one, the responsible one, whilst you are afforded the luxury of whining and complaining. However, Samantha gulped. She didn't like the sound of it, however. However's much like their close cousins, the buts and the because never heralded pleasant news. I've had enough of it. All you ever do is rely on people. You're incapable of doing things for yourself. And why are you still thinking about Lillian anyway? I thought she stopped being friends with you. Don't you remember? Because I do. You were crying for weeks afterwards, and I was the one who had to hear it. I was the one who had to deal with it. I've always been there for you, whenever you go through one of your maudlin turns or manic episodes. No matter how late it is, or how inconvenient, I'm always there to listen to your words. Responsible, reliable Roberta. Well, now I see that I'm also relevant Roberta. Even though I put so much effort into our friendship, you still don't appreciate it. Now that's bullshit. You never think about me. All you do is think about her. If Lillian were to apologize to you, then you would drop our friendship in a heartbeat. You're so ficklesome and so selfish too. I'm just somebody convenient you can turn to for help, but you don't really value me as a human being. It's like you don't even realize I have feelings too. And you. I can't believe you're still thinking about her. That you're still too obsessed, so obsessed. You are obsessed with a girl who wants nothing to do with you anymore. A girl who must be far smarter than I evidently am, because she realized you were a pain long before I did, and so refuses to put up with you anymore. Ow. Well, I'm through with it. I don't want to babysit a stupid girl desperate to get her heart trampled on anymore. Trampled, okay. If you want to be hurt by Lillian, then go ahead and be my guest. But don't come crawling to me when it all blows up in your face again. I'm sick of it. Hi. Samantha stared at Roberta, her eyes wide, struck dumb. For a girl who was fairly talented at arranging words in accessible, intelligent ways, her exam results said as much. Samantha couldn't say a word. How could she respond to that? Every single one of Roberta's barbed comments hit home, tipped with an exquisite kind of poison which burned a hole through Samantha's already damaged ego. Although that barrage of insults had come out in a mad rush, expelled from Roberta's mouth as though it was something disgusting and shameful, it had been too clearly articulated to have been born from a momentary burst of anger. Roberta did not do spur of the moment, not even now, as she stood there, hair wind-swept, face flushed with rage, her fingers clenched into fists. Even after she had shouted so hard her vocal cords threatened to tear, her words had not been unprecedented, unmediated. Roberta had meant what she had said, down to the very last syllable. Maybe Samantha had been pushing too far these last few weeks. Now Roberta didn't even want to be her friend anymore, just like Lillian before her. Once people grew to know Samantha well enough, they began to realize Samantha's cheerful smiles and self-effacing barbs were all for show. She could be funny, yep, charming too, but underneath it all she was neurotic, anxious, and perpetually troubled. And it was just too much for most people to deal with. So that was it. Roberta hated her. Maybe she had hated her for a long time, and she had been far too polite to tell her. Well, at least she knew now. That was good, wasn't it? Nice and refreshing. The truth was a beautiful thing. It should have been, if only it didn't hurt so much. Samantha sniffled. It took her a few moments to realize she was crying. Her tears, hot and salty, dripped down her cheeks, cooling fast from the cold wind. There was no remorse to be had. Not from Lillian and not from Roberta. Not from herself either. She couldn't refuse Roberta's claims. It would be impossible. She knew Roberta was telling the truth. She was a pain. A burden. Maybe she shouldn't have gone on this trip to begin with. Maybe it would have been better if she had spent these 2 days holed up in her bedroom, alone, lying under her duvet with her eyes closed pretending to be dead. That way she wouldn't be able to upset anyone. So, this was for the best, right? It would make everybody happier. Tears the size of penny pieces dripping down her cheeks, Samantha turned and ran. Ran away. She didn't know where she was going, but that was fine. She hadn't known where she was beforehand, anyway. And anywhere, absolutely anywhere, would be better than being with Roberta, being scrutinized under her cold, passionless gaze, which held not a single shred of love. Not a single shred of compassion. If only she could run away from herself too. But that was the one thing she knew she could never do. No matter how quick her stride, how furious her footsteps. She couldn't outrun her own mind. Whoa! Georgia whistled. Now that was something else. I felt like I was in the middle of a soap opera. Roberta trembled, her face white. She had already said things, horrible things, that she couldn't take back. It hadn't even been because she was mad at Samantha. Not really. Although it was true, those lingering resentments had been building up, unchecked, within her for quite some time, like cobwebs in an old, abandoned house. Although Samantha had been grating on Roberta's patience, and Roberta had been meaning to have a serious talk with the other girl for a while now, this had undoubtedly been a bad time to hold that discussion. Particularly when it had not been discussion so much as one-sided verbal assault, which Samantha had been incapable of dealing with. Roberta sighed, running one hand through her hair. She hadn't lost her temper like that in a long while. And now Samantha was gone. She had run away, and Roberta had no idea where she was. If we find out she's hung herself from a tree, or drowned in a lake, I guess we'll all know who to blame. Percy and I are witnesses. That isn't funny, Georgia. Roberta's shoulders tensed. Don't be ridiculous. She isn't going to die. You say that, but Samantha's kind of pathetic, don't you think? She's the kind of girl who could probably drown herself into a fist of water. Roberta winced. Cruel for her words were, Georgia did have a point. Samantha had never been the most resilient person. Don't feel too bad for Bobby. If she really does die, she'd probably thank you for it. Hasn't she been repressed for a long time? It's hard to tell given she makes so many jokes about it. But I don't think she's a very happy person. Then this is just fine. Samantha is obviously too much of a coward to kill herself without a push in the right direction, so you did her a real favor there, Bobby. Georgia. Roberta held a hand to her mouth. She looked as though she was going to be sick. Please don't say that! I feel terrible! It's no use getting unconscious now, Bobby. What's done is done. You can't change the past. Oh, God! Roberta moaned, burying her head in her hands. Why did Georgia have to sound so gleeful? Her tastes really were macabre. Well, a pause. It's not like I don't understand how you feel, Bobby. I can be pretty horrible sometimes, but I suppose I have to give credit where credit is due, even to you. Taking care of someone day in, day out must be quite a chore. I hardly even know the girl, and she annoys me whenever I see her. Everybody annoys you, Georgia. True. But I think it is somewhat impressive that you have been able to stay by her for such a long time, Bobby. And it was kind of cool seeing you get all worked up like that. I've never heard you shout like that before. For a moment there, you actually sounded passionate. And look what good it caused. Passion only causes problems. Perhaps, but life would be far less enjoyable without it. It suited you well. I don't know about that. I do. Take my word for it. I do not give compliments easily. And, I guess since this whole thing was kind of my fault, I'm sorry. Eh? Roberta let her hands fall from her face. A small, tentative smile began to tug at the corner of her lips. Maybe Georgia wasn't that bad after all. Or maybe that's just an act. Well, thank you. No problem. I'm beginning to get a little worried for. Worried? You? I hardly believe it. There's a first time for everything. I've been thinking. Georgia placed one hand underneath her chin, pondering. If Samantha really does die, do you think I will be an accessory to the crime? Instantly, what was that sound? Can I actually move back? What the hell is that? I have no idea. Instantly, any goodwill Roberta may have felt toward Georgia was snuffed, like a candle being blown out. Ew. You're not sorry at all, you two-faced liar! Wait, that was a phone before? Eh? But before Roberta had a chance to continue her tirade, she was silenced by an electronic jingle emitting from her pocket. It was her phone. Her poor, much abused phone. It was working again. And Samantha ran as fast as her legs would carry her. Fierce in solitude achievement. Okay. I have no idea what that means. Someone turned around as far. Okay, the text appeared later. She didn't know where she was going and she didn't care. She just wanted to get away. To escape. But what she really wanted to escape from, she could never leave. How could she part with her own mind when her mind made her who she was? Diseased for it may have been. It wasn't possible. The wind ran through her hair and stung her cheeks, painting them red. A sharp metallic taste filled her mouth. Saliva rose to her throat, sharp and bitter. She tried to swallow it down, but this only made her feel worse. Her stomach hurt. It felt like a small monster was nesting inside her, tearing at her insides with its sharp claws and serrated teeth. She winced, coming to a halt by a large tree. She pressed one hand against its bark, a comfortingly solid presence, and doubled over. The other hand held against her stomach. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, salty like sea air. Samantha never seemed to run out of tears. She was like a banshee. She could cry for hours and she didn't even need a reason to. Sometimes she broke down while doing the most mundane of tasks, boiling her socks or brushing her teeth, and she had no idea why. One day perhaps she would cry so much she would float away in the sea of her own tears just like Alice. Maybe she'd be happier like that. She had always hated living in London. Samantha's stomach churned. The unpleasant aftertaste of those highly caffeinated energy drinks was coming back to haunt her. Roberta had been right. She shouldn't have drunk so much. Why had she drunk so much? It was because she didn't know her own limits. She shouldn't have felt this bad. She hadn't even drunk any alcohol. This was pathetic. She was pathetic. No wonder Georgia made fun of her. No wonder Roberta got mad at her. No wonder Leon hated her. New tears began to drip down Samantha's cheeks. Her stomach hurt. She couldn't breathe. Was she having a panic attack? Maybe it was because she was going to be sick and she did not want to be. She didn't have to be. She was stronger than that. She was. Wasn't she? Probably not. Her throat burned. Her mouth kept filling with bile, despite her efforts to swallow it back down. She leaned her body against the nearby tree trunk, pressing her head against it hard for support. Her palm hurt. Had she scratched it against the tree? Maybe she was bleeding. She didn't know. What she did know, however, was that approximately 5 seconds later she was sick. Horrible, painfully, seemingly endlessly sick, as she vomited everything she had eaten over the last 8 hours onto the ground. Thankfully, what she had eaten did not constitute very much. Her vomit was clear, almost entirely liquid, but it still burned her throat when it came back up. Ah well. Never mind. She had experienced worse. Samantha wiped her chin with the back of her arm and straightened up, or at least she attempted to. The moment she did, she was attacked by a sudden spell of dizziness that almost knocked her off her feet. Maybe she should have gotten more sleep last night. Why hadn't she gotten more sleep? Samantha liked sleeping. It was one of her favorite states of being. Yeah, similar, actually. But getting to sleep had been hard lately. Being Samantha in general was hard, but these last 3 months had been more painful than most. Samantha sniffed and wiped her eyes. They felt red and raw, and rubbing them only made them hurt. Where was she, anyway? In a nice place. She peeked out from behind the trunk of the tree she had been leaning against and examined her surroundings. It didn't really make much difference. The land was just as nondescript, with its unbroken line of rolling hills, as it had been 10 minutes ago. Samantha had been lost then, and she was still lost now. She had no idea where she was. Beyond the large tree trunk, the boughs still stripped bare from the winter, she could see a lake. The surface was dark and murky like black tea inside a teacup. Please don't do anything stupid. The wind whistled over the top of the water, making it ripple. It was soothing. Pretty. Other people may have deemed this sight decently unremarkable and walked on, but Samantha had always found these visions of nature comforting. Maybe it was because of her childhood. It reminded her of home. The peace and quiet of the countryside, the absence of all other human life, made her feel like an explorer on a newly discovered alien planet. She far preferred it here. It was much nicer than the city. Being alone, surrounded by trees, even trees that were recovering from a particularly cold winter, where both gnarled and naked, was comforting. If she really did die here, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. She'd prefer dying here, out in the open, surrounded by the smell of dirt and earth and wildflowers, than back in her tiny room in London. If she died in London, she would have no peace. Her soul would be besieged by countless others who had met similar fates, alone in apartments with no friends or family, and she would become one of many, another statistic in a nameless, faceless sea. In the countryside, she could be herself. She could be Samantha. When she died, she wanted to die here. But as it soon turned out, Samantha would not be given the chance to curl up and will herself out of existence. Not this time. This small, secluded spot wasn't quite as secluded as Samantha had first thought. There was somebody else there. Samantha could see, out in the distance, a distinctly humanoid figure standing in the lake. Even from a few feet away, with their back facing her, Samantha could tell this person was beautiful. Their long blonde hair fluttering in the breeze attested as much. For the sun was muted, hidden behind a thick layer of grey clouds. What to the light that was able to filter down to the ground seemed to be directed around this single figure, so that her cornflower hair shimmered. The Mr. Girl seemed completely at ease with her surroundings, as though she belonged there, was one with the landscape itself. Samantha felt as though she was staring at a canvas, and this girl was part of it. To remove the girl from the scene, you would need to cut a hole out of the lake itself, leaving a vast scar of abject nothingness running through the countryside. Samantha did wonder for what kind of person would paddle in the middle of a freezing lake in early March? Wouldn't she catch a cold? It didn't seem very sensible. Maybe then, this beautiful girl was not a human girl at all. Maybe she was a fairy, or perhaps an elf, a magical creature descended to Earth from an enchanted Sylvan kingdom. Maybe. Samantha stood there staring. Watching. Her heart hammered painfully inside her chest, threatening to splinter her ribs. Was it just her imagination, or was her heart beating far too loud? What if the Mr. Girl heard her? What would happen then? Would she cast a spell on her? Bewitch her? If so, it was too late. Samantha was already enchanted. Maybe the beating of her heart really had been that loud after all. The girl out in the lake lifted her head suddenly, like a rabbit, alerted to the sound of an approaching predator. And as if in slow motion she turned. All of a sudden, with a gasp of recognition, Samantha realized. She realized something she should have realized a long time ago, as soon as she stumbled upon this apparition paddling in the lake. This was no fairy. Of course it wasn't a fairy. It was, instead, somebody that Samantha knew rather well. The long blonde hair should have given it away, for she so often wore her hair tied up, Samantha had forgotten what it looked like loose around her shoulders like this. It was unmistakable, without a shadow of doubt. None other than Lillian Wordsworth. Oh. Well, this is nice. I suppose so. Lillian had tied her blonde hair up once more and was now wearing the rest of her St. Mary's uniform, which she had previously folded beneath a tree before she went paddling. Unlike Samantha, Lillian was a sensible person. Of course, she would have ensured her pinafore and cardigan didn't get wet. Samantha should have expected nothing else. The two girls were sat underneath a tree a few yards away from the one Samantha had initially paused at, which Samantha was glad for. Samantha didn't want Lillian realizing just how sick she had been before she had stumbled across her. That would be incredibly embarrassing, and wouldn't be the best way of making a fresh first impression. It was so unfair. Lillian got to return to Samantha's life as a vision of loveliness, an indistinct figure almost like a will-o'-wisp, a haunting magical creature too breathtaking to be considered truly human. Samantha, on the other hand, must have looked like a wreck. She had just been sick, even though she had tried to wipe the evidence away from her mouth with the back of her hand, and her eyes were red and puffy, making it obvious to anybody with an ounce of common sense that she had been crying. Her short hair, snipped by her own inexpert fingers, had never felt more ridiculously embarrassingly exposing. Lillian always did tell her she was easy to read, so transparent her skin might as well have been see-through. Samantha never tried to argue the point, because she knew Lillian was right. Samantha was very rarely tried to hide her true feelings. She didn't have the knack for it. Lillian, on the other hand, had always been more removed, her small smiles carefully constructed. Lillian never came to class late, and she always remembered to brush her hair, and she wore her school uniform with such precision she could almost be termed as a living work of art. The gulf between the two girls had never felt as pronounced as it did now. No wonder Lillian had stopped being her friend. They really were polar opposites, were they? Well, Samantha blinked shyly, searching for something to say, but the words would not come. Why couldn't she think of anything to say? She was usually good at table talk. It was true her skills had been getting a little rusty through this use lately, but surely she had one or two interesting ideas knocking around inside her skull. Wasn't she supposed to be intelligent? Not a genius, not by any stretch of the imagination. She was not like Lillian, but at least competently clever. She had even read Cat and understood most of it too. What cause did she have for concern anyway? Her previous conversation with Lillian had gone well, even if it had lasted little more than a minute. She should try to calm down, take a deep breath, and gather whatever wits she still had about her. She could do this. She would. It sure is a coincidence seeing you here. Lillian's reply was cool and concise, quite unlike Samantha's. Not really. Hey, well, I just didn't expect it. But we came here on the same school trip. What? It was inevitable we would run into each other again at some point. I suppose so. But you're not in my study group, so I thought I wouldn't get the chance. Actually, something suddenly occurred to Samantha. Where's the rest of your group? You didn't get lost too, did you? But even as she said that, Samantha knew it was a foolish question. Lillian Wordsworth did not get lost. She always knew exactly where she was at all times. It was one of her many mysterious talents. I'm not lost. I simply went off on my own for a while. But why? A sigh. Because I had the misfortune of being in a group with one of the most irritating people I know. Even more irritating than me? Lillian couldn't help but smile at this comment, as much as she tried to maintain her carefully distant expression. Although Samantha could be an incredibly irritating person when she put her mind to it, and she was more than capable of accomplishing this task even when she did not, there was no denying she could be amusing company sometimes. Interesting, very interesting. Are we going this route after all? I don't know. On occasions. Yeah. Far more irritating than you. I can hardly believe such a person exists, but it is true. Samantha giggled. You weren't in group with the Quincy, were you? The one and the same. How did you guess? Well, you said somebody's more irritating than me, which instantly narrows down the list of potential suspects. And as Georgia was in my group antagonizing Roberta, it could not have been her. Dear God. The Quincy must be a pain if even you realize it, Sam. Hehehe. She can be quite intense at times. Lillian exhaled heavily, holding a hand to her forehead. Intense isn't the right word. She's utterly infuriating. She follows me around like a golden retriever everywhere I go, and she keeps taking photos too. I'm surprised she hasn't asked for a blood sample yet, or a hair from my head. Maybe she takes them when you are asleep, then writes about it on her blog. Please don't remind me about her blog. How could I not? It was so incredible. I think about it at least once every day. I'm sure she posted enough personal information about me on there to warrant the restraining order. Well, at least she has good taste. She clearly recognizes your genius. She's a big fan of your poetry, you know. I know. And I'm somewhat proud my writing was able to make such an impact on somebody, but when it's at the expense of my own privacy, it does become somewhat unsettling. But I think she's taken down that blog now. Are you sure? I did ask her. I didn't think she would listen to me, given she never seems to listen to it, but it seemed to work. How were you able to get rid of the Quincy anyway? She's devoted, I'm surprised she didn't follow you here. She's so devoted, I'm surprised she didn't follow you here. Well, I'm not particularly proud of my actions. Oh? Does that mean you did something underhandedly then? I simply did what needed to be done. If I had not extricated myself from the situation, I fear I could have done some things I would later come to regret. You can try to dress it up however you want, but you're only making me more and more curious. Just what exactly did you do? Well, I may have bumped into her whilst we were walking, quite accidentally, of course. Of course. And because of this purely accidental, unavoidable event, she may have fallen over and twisted her ankle. Whoa. Samantha whistled, impressed despite herself. She must have fallen pretty hard. Hard enough. Doesn't this count as assault? It wasn't assault. I already told you it was an accident. I feel a great deal of remorse about it. Yes. For Samantha found it amusing, this was rather unexpected news. Lillian was usually too disaffected to allow other people to get under her skin like that. The Quincy really must have been annoying her, for her to resort to violence like that. But isn't it still too much? For Samantha's own relationship with the Quincy was rather complicated. She was not sure if she could comment Lillian's actions. Berate Lillian, agree with Lillian. Oh. I think I'm going to, well, maybe not regret it. Samantha might regret it. Sorry, Samantha, but I just can't agree with her, even if, you know, sure, the Quincy acts a bit like a pain in the ass, but still, going with something like that is just too much. I'm sorry, I have to berate. Silly Lily. Samantha chided her gently, a small smile on her face. If accidents didn't count as crimes, then manslaughter wouldn't be legal. But Lillian dismissed her light scolding with a disdainful frown, a flip of her hair. Don't be so melodramatic. It didn't kill her. There's hardly a scratch on her. She's incredibly durable. Well, I'll be the first to attest to that. Lillian hadn't seen how much the Quincy could drain before she threw it all back up, like Samantha had. And after the Quincy had that most unfortunate fall and tragically visited her poor uncle, I offered to find a teacher and inform them of an accident, like the good Samaritan I am. You mean run away? Please don't make me sound so irresponsible. I wasn't running away. I do not run away from my problems. I never realized you were so shameless, Lillian. I thought you were a stickler for the school rules, being the head of the student council and all. I am, but some rules must be bent to preserve the peace. That is how democracy works. How corrupt. It's no wonder Georgia is so disillusioned with you. I I thought you said you were going to help us pure students when you became the head of the student council, not oppress us with brute force. Georgia is disillusioned about everything. She's even disillusioned about being disillusioned. I have no desire to cater the fools who wish to cause trouble for the sake of it. Did she try to sneak a bear into her dorm? She tried to argue on behalf of it, and so passionately too. I was almost moved to tears. And yet you said it with such a straight face. I was being sarcastic. Samantha reeled in Fox's surprise, her eyes wide. You? Sarcastic? But isn't sarcasm the lowest form of wit? Some situations are so ridiculous they deserve nothing more than sarcasm. Hey, you're becoming awfully conservative in your old age. High school old age, right. Don't be so facetious. I'm only a couple of months older than you. Samantha winced, pressing her hand against her forehead. Did Lillian really have to flick her? Those in power always punched downwards, didn't they? Or in this case, flicked. Yeah, flicked is a powerful weapon here. Lillian's fingernails were carefully groomed and filled to perfection, unlike Samantha's, which were little more than patent stumps. Being flicked by Lillian's far superior fingernails, even in an act of playful jest, was quite painful. And yet, even so, Samantha couldn't help but smile. She could hardly believe it. She was actually talking to Lillian. They were having a conversation and they were getting along with each other. This only served to confirm things in Samantha's heart. Being by Lillian's side really was where she belonged. Without Lillian, Samantha couldn't smile, couldn't laugh, could hardly even speak. For the last 3 months, Samantha had felt like the mermaid from the fairy tale. She had been unable to talk, and when she did, nothing had sounded quite right. Her own voice had grown softer and softer by the day, until she hardly even recognized it as hers anymore. Now that she was with Lillian, however, conversation came to her so easily. She felt more assured of her words, as though they truly did belong to her, and she meant every single thing she said. She had found her voice again. Being with Lillian gave her a purpose. It made her happy. Huh? Samantha blinked. Her eyes felt wet. Was she crying again? Lillian frowned, leaning in just a little closer to her once dearest friend. Sam? What is it? Samantha sniffed, wiping her eyes with the back of her arm. She had cried so much that she was beginning to feel like a prune, distinctly desiccated, all dried out. Her throat was sore too. Inwardly, Samantha cursed herself. She had only just managed to reconnect with Lillian, and she was already spoiling it. She just couldn't let herself enjoy the moment, could she? Like a Puritan, she always had to throw the things that made her happy away. She was making herself look weak, stupid, pathetic, and she couldn't stop herself, because that was what she really was. She was weak, she was stupid, she was pathetic, and she couldn't stop crying. I'm sorry, I feel overwhelmed, that's all. Overwhelmed? Why? Was our talk about my corrupt conservative policies really that depressing? No, that isn't it. Then what? I don't know. I can't really explain it. You can always try. But... we have been through this before many times, Samantha. How can I ever hope to understand how I feel if you never explain it to me? Although the Quincy seems to revere me as some kind of goddess, I cannot read minds, and I won't be able to help you unless you enlighten me. But I thought it was because I kept trying to enlighten you, as you put it, that you... Lillian raised an eyebrow. Then I what? Samantha bit down on her lower lip. Her shoulders trembled. She didn't want to talk about last Christmas. Merely thinking about it was painful. Why had the conversation become so serious? Samantha did not cope well with serious things. She far preferred frivolity, mainly because she herself rarely had cause to feel happy. try to change the subject. Oh, it's nothing. Not really. It's nothing. Not really. Now that sounds awfully familiar. What do you mean? Samantha tensed, her eyes wide. She was not entirely sure how, but she got the intense feeling she had disappointed Lillian. It was not pleasant. In fact, it felt as though a bucket of cold water had been poured down the back of her school shirt. That is what you said to me earlier, when I inquired about your welfare. You said there was nothing wrong then too, for there plainly was. I may have said it, but it was not out of malice. It was because I did not want to trouble you with my petty concerns. But I would not have asked how you were feeling if I was not troubled about your concerns, no matter how petty they may have been. No, they may be, actually. But that isn't fair, Lily. What do you mean? I mean, you can be contrary at times. You say you are concerned about me, yet when I tell you how I feel, you turn the other way. Quite frankly, I do not know what I should say to you to earn your forgiveness, and I do not know what it was I did to begin with that was so very worthy of your scorn. Samantha breathed heavily. One hand held her chest. She would not normally have snapped at Lillian like this, but the gulf of silence that stretched between the pair had managed over time to eat away at Samantha's usual reservations, and perhaps her over-reveration of Lillian too. For Samantha respected Lillian a great deal and still cared immensely for her opinion. She could not hide the fact that, often in their friendship, she had felt slighted, belittled, abused, unappreciated, sidelined, and snubbed. Lillian Wordsworth may have been a promising young poet, but she was considerably less talented when it came to the arcane arts of being a good friend. Maybe Samantha thought this was how Roberta felt about her. Hadn't Samantha treated Roberta in the exact same way Lillian was now treating her? For Samantha's ears still stung from the criticism Roberta had thrown at her, she did not blame her friend for her outburst. She could not. Doing so would be the height of hypocrisy. Not when she herself knew how it felt to continue bite her tongue in Lillian's presence, for fear she would say something she would later regret, only to bite it so frequently her mouth swam with blood and everything tasted bitter. You have not been fair to me, Lily. I know you dislike when I am too maudlin, so I have been attempting to disguise my feelings for your peace of mind. Yet this does not satisfy me either. At this point I do not know what you want. Please enlighten me, because I would very much like to know. Samantha, calm down. We can't have a discussion like this. I'm trying, but you are not making it any easier. I do not care for being spoken to like a small child. Then start behaving like an adult. This is not a question of maturity. I'm just trying to tell you how I feel. Why must my emotions make me inferior to you? Why do you never take me seriously? Must you dismiss every single thing I say? I may have laughed your barbed comments off in the past, but that does not mean they did not hurt. I'm tired of being treated like this, Lily. I thought we were friends. Lillian surveyed Samantha calmly, her hands folded in her lap, in a composed manner that did little to calm Samantha's shaken nerves. For Lillian was not smiling. There was not a trace of a smile on her face. She looked horribly smug in her swan-like serenity. If Lillian was a swan, what did that make Samantha? No doubt she was the ugly duckling. We're friends, Samantha, but how can we continue to be friends now? I believe you have made your own feelings about me quite apparent. Eh? Samantha gasped as though the air had been sucked out of her lungs. It was true she had been angry with Lillian, but she had not expected Lillian to counter her quite so coldly. Even now, she still wanted to be Lillian's friend. Perhaps she wanted to be more than that, for she knew Lillian was not always a very nice person. That did not change the fact that Samantha liked being with her. Lillian delighted her as nobody else did, with her sense of humor, her quick wit, and her pretty face. Unfortunately, by the same token, nobody upset her quite like Lillian did. Samantha was not content to simply feel sad when she had Lillian argued. Instead, she felt devastated. Let Lillian say whatever she pleased about Samantha, Taylor Coleridge. but at least she had never been one to do things by halves.
Lily, do you really no longer want to be my friend? It isn't that I don't want to. I can't. Can't? Nope. Dealing with you is too exhausting, and it upsets me. And it's infuriating that you don't even try to get better. I do try. I have been trying, but it's hard. You just don't understand, Lillian.
Samantha could feel the tears. They had been threatening to follow for a while now, but she tried to hold them back.
You don't know how sick I am. I've felt awful for a long time. Longer than I can even remember. I just don't know what to do anymore.
Samantha's words began to break up in her mouth. They no longer felt like they meant anything. Rather than signifying concepts, things Samantha could understand, they were just noise. I feel like all my choices led to something bad so far. Rather than signifying concepts, things Samantha could understand, they were just noise, empty noise, okay. Words were not enough. Not now. No matter what she said, it would not make any difference. The expression on Lillian's face, a mixture of sympathy, sorrow, and worst of all, poorly concealed irritation, confirmed it. Lillian was no longer looking at her as an equal, a genuine friend. Instead, she was just a poor soul with a medical condition, somebody to be pitied. Yeah, but not respected. Certainly not loved. Lillian Wordsworth had never been able to truly love beings she deemed to be inferior to herself.
That is precisely why, Sam. I understand you well enough, but I can never know how sick you are. We are just too dissimilar. I think our friendship was a bad idea. I'm not good for you, and you are not good for me. Ouch. All we do is hurt each other. It would be sensible to bring things to an end before it goes any further. I'm not too prideful to admit when I am out of my depth. I can't deal with you anymore. Lillian! Hi!
Samantha tried to stem her tears, but it was too late. They began to stream down her cheeks before she knew what was happening, like April rain. Within seconds, she was crying so hard her whole body started to convulse. Her shoulders shook. Her very bones seemed to shake. She could hardly breathe. She could hardly talk. All she could do was cry, until she felt her whole body would fall apart, and everything stuffed inside her that made her world would leak out of the seams. If that was the case, then so be it. Let it happen. Samantha was sick of herself, almost as much as Lillian now was. I guess this is the good moment to actually end the episode here, and we'll see where this is going in the next one. So for now, hope you enjoyed it, and truly hope to see you tomorrow. Bye bye.